Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. I'm Nick Zulovich, part of the team at Cherokee Media Group and senior editor at Subprime Auto Finance News and AutoFin Journal. In today's webinar, a customer-centric approach to risk and recovery, we're going to learn more from Ann Holtzman and Barrett Kreitz at Allied Solutions. But before we get started, I want to go over just a couple of quick housekeeping items for today's session. We are recording today's webinar and we'll make that recording available to you as soon as possible. So just keep watch of your inbox for a message containing a link to that recording, so you can review the great material or share it with other colleagues at your organization. You will be in listen-only mode for this webinar, but we will reserve some time after the presentation for a Q&A session. You can submit your questions using the Q&A box and the chat function on the Zoom control panel. And if we don't have time to get to your question today, don't worry, because we'll forward it on to the team at Allied Solutions so they can respond back to you directly via email. So with plenty of knowledge and recommendations to share, let's get right to our webinar with Ann Holtzman and Barrett Kreitz. The floor is now yours.
Great. Thank you so much, Nick, again, for having us join today. Barrett and I really appreciate this opportunity to at least network with our colleagues via web, since we all can't network in person, and looking forward to being able to do that again in 2021. In today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about what's happening in 2020. Doubt if I'll share anything with the group that you aren't already very aware of, but just looking at how 2020 is shaping up and how we at Allied are solving for what will be the new normal, and some of the new approaches that we've had to take to long-standing business challenges as we face a world where many associates are working remote and where it's critically important for our service providers and clients to interact with us digitally. We'll be looking at problem solving for that new normal, and then Barrett, our Director of User Experience and an absolute asset to Allied's team, will be leveraging user experience and talking a lot about his background in how you focus on a customer-centric approach to your products and services. So we hope that you will find this agenda worthwhile and a real different approach to some of our normal discussions around risk and recovery. Just a few fast facts about Allied Solutions. Again, not doing this in any form of a sales pitch, but just to give you a little bit of information about where our expertise comes from. 40 years of industry experience with financial institutions. We monitor about 21 million automobile loans today, and we've recovered over $100 million of recovery for our clients in the last 5 years. So we do believe that we come from a place of understanding our customer and understanding that we have to stay on the cutting edge in order to survive in this environment. As we look at what's happening in 2020, probably the one we can all agree with is we're not quite sure what the true effects of COVID-19 are going to be. We look at the ongoing stress that lenders and auto financiers have in navigating what is now the new normal, having to work from remote locations, having to have multiple service operations done when everyone collectively cannot work together. It's also unclear how long the effects of the COVID-19 unemployment will be, and whether or not our business resurgence will come during the first half of 2021, the last half of 2021, or maybe even into 2022. A forward look at what 2021 is going to deliver to us. Again, as I look at managing this particular area for Allied Solutions, the ongoing stress that it's putting on us, because there is the fear of the unknown. And in addition to that, what might happen with record auto delinquencies that we haven't seen since 2008 and 2009. In addition, looking at COVID-19, we know that it's done one thing for us, and that is it's forced us to readapt in order to continue business continuity and business practices and business services. And while we readapt, we think about, well, how should we look at 2021? Not only the needs of our consumers, of our clients, of our borrowers, but also of all of those service providers and business partners that we depend on to effectuate our services and our business for our customers. And finally, we know above all else, it's going to be mission critical to leverage digital solutions effectively to help accommodate both volume and communication, whether that be with consumers, business partners, or service providers. Thus, we thought this topic was top of mind to discuss today and share with you some of the experiences that we have had in adapting a user experience lab and user experience approach as we look at leveraging our digital solutions for both our clients and our service providers. Again, not really sharing anything here that many of you don't already know and understand, and that is, we're looking at whether or not new loan volume and new vehicle sales are going to weather the storm. And as many of us know right now, when you simply look at the supply versus the demand, new vehicle supply is significantly down. We're seeing a lot of used car market volatility. Right now, it looks absolutely great. If you have used cars to sell, now is the time to do it. The prices peaked in July, expecting continued decline in used car prices, but again, there just may be volatility related to that. We know in the prime market that the equity in the vehicles, because of the price, has continued to increase, and that negative equity has been rolled over with all the incentives on new car sales prior to COVID. As we look at repossession volumes, that's really an area that will affect the auto market. And in discussions just yesterday with one of the leading technology providers for repossession agents, 2020 is expected to be down almost 58% in repossession volumes. So repossession assignments and those vehicles that get secured for repossession that can then get liquidated continues to rise. The pressure that that's going to put, along with increased delinquencies, again, projected to be up almost 20% if the economy does not rebound, is going to put a lot of pressure on all of us in the lending space to manage those repossessions, to manage service providers, and to manage digitally the communication with your service providers and customers. So as we looked at our risk management impact from COVID, we looked at really three key areas. The heightened need for accurate data. In other words, how can we anticipate the risk that is to come and have early indicators of that risk? We know that there's growing delinquencies and increased deficiency balances because of the amount of payment modifications that have been made in the true spirit of consumer advocacy and consumer-centric approaches that is a part of each of our strategies as we look at the important role we play as risk management and lending providers in the market today. And finally, we knew there was an amplified need to adjust our strategy. delayed financial impact. There's a need for a longer term versus a shorter term strategy. And also there, for us at Allied, is the unknown insurance regulation and insurance cancellation moratoriums that we're navigating. And we need to ensure that where our service providers, our insurance carriers, and our clients can interact with us in a more digitally streamlined way, we know that we can impact our business overall. And how do we approach this amplified need for greater strategy with a true understanding of customer need, sitting in the customer's shoes, understanding how the customer wants to interact with us. And all of that led to a strategy of deploying and hiring and really finessing and massaging the need for a user experience lab within our enterprise technology group. And we're going to talk a little bit about why the use of these type of resources we think lead to financial benefit for lending institutions. So as a poll question, Nick, we'll ask this. Do you feel confident that your risk management solutions will optimize the returns necessary in an increased era of deficiency and deficiency balance growth in 2021? So we can now stop and share with you the results of today's poll. 44 of you feel very confident that your risk management solutions will optimize your returns, even in a volatile economy. 19% of you are no, you don't think that they will, and 38% of you are unsure. So again, I think what that tells us is we're all kind of in the same boat, and that is because we've never been in this situation before. It's very difficult to predict what's to come, and we may in many ways feel unsure about it and be looking at solutions and maybe even some out-of-the-box, more customer-centric solutions in attacking how we optimize our risk management solutions and products. So as we looked at Allied Solutions for solving the new normal, we looked at a number of factors that said, wow, how do we take a product or service that we know is needed in the marketplace and find a way for us to get into the heads of and understand, get a complete understanding of how the consumer or user benefits from the product or service that we have. So recently, we developed and deployed an ancillary product refund process, both a technology and a service, but we knew that we needed to hear more from our clients and potential clients, as well as dealers, consumers, and lenders around this very complex and strictly regulated process. So we identified that consumers, lenders, and dealers are all key stakeholders in this product and service, that the refund process is complex, and that we really didn't have the information that we needed for voice of the customer. So we collaborated with our UX lab and asked them to go out to the marketplace and help us solve this complex refund process for all parties, consumers, lenders, dealers, and service providers. And it was a new approach to deploying a product and service to the market. And I will tell you, I've been very impressed with what we've been able to glean from all the work that they've been doing in advancing the product and service that we have from the lens of the users. And that has been a huge learning for us at Allied. So we looked at a situation where the regulatory landscape continues to change. And as it does, it's going to put much more pressure on those parties that are a part of the process. So it could be a lender, it could be a consumer, could be a service provider, could be a dealer, or it could be a product provider. But we know this, the regulatory landscape is changing literally almost daily, absolutely monthly. And we needed to ensure that our product or service had the right interaction with the stakeholders, consumers, lenders, dealers, and product providers. And we knew using a user experience lab would give us a lens in, a view in to that customer-centric approach. As we looked at it, we knew that this user experience approach would increase the importance of identifying and anticipating consumer concerns so that we could have an effective and efficient solution. How and when we interact is becoming increasingly important. I'm going to turn the presentation now over to our UX Lab Director and really our thought partner around all things user experience, Barrett Kreit, and have him fill in all of the blanks that I have not yet answered, but he'll get you to some true action items tied to this type of approach.
Thank you very much, Anne, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate the time and attention, and I sincerely hope that you come away with some new learning, some new ideas, some thought starters on how you might start to think about your users and your customers and whomever you deem your users in unique and different ways, and kind of assess your processes and see how they are reaching your users' needs ultimately. There is a Q&A option in your view window. It says Q&A, you can click on it, you can ask questions in that window. Highly encourage you to do that as well, because I'm going to be sharing some concepts and I'll be moving fairly quickly, and I don't want to glaze over anything. And so would love an opportunity to answer questions or follow up with you after the fact. But as Anne was intimating, we Allied about 2 years ago introduced a user experience team, and most of us, so we're 10 people now, about half of us were actually an agency partner for Allied for about 4 years prior to that. It used to be a vendor, and then we brought the team in-house because I think Allied started to see the potential of what we were offering, and also the cost savings of bringing the organization in-house certainly played into it as well. But ultimately we call it the UX Lab because in UX land we like to have fancy names for things, especially when we start tying in things like science and those sort of things. So I'll get into a little bit about what UX actually means on the next slide. So you usually hear UI and UX kind of like intermittently combined. You may, in your world, think of terms like voice of customer, or maybe the initials CX, like client experience, customer experience, consumer experience. All of these things are closely related inside of the world of UX and UI. And there is a distinct difference between what is a UI and what is a UX. I think on the surface level, a UI is what something looks like. It's the thing that you're actually interfacing with to accomplish a task. And this can happen on a digital screen, like we've been talking a lot about, but it also happens in your daily life, right? So every day you walk through a door. That door is an interface. The experience is, what is it like to use that door? Have you ever pushed on a door when you should have pulled? That is the experience that you just had with that door, right? You just had a negative experience with that door because you tried to push it and you should have pulled it. Maybe enhancing the interface is adding a sign that says push, right? And now all of a sudden we should be able to measure that the amount of people who interact with the door incorrectly goes down, and therefore the positive experience goes up. So a slight little difference on what something looks like and what something feels like to use it. And ultimately, it's impossible to not have an experience. Every day, everything you interact with, whether it's a digital screen or the real world environment, getting in and out of your car, for instance, you have an experience when you interact with those things. And it's absolutely impossible to not have one. What I challenge you to do is to be mindful about the experiencing that you're providing to your partners, your consumers, your customers, however you deem them. Because they are having an experience with you. They are having an experience with your product. Whether it's, I need to call and make a payment because I tried to do it online and I couldn't succeed. I couldn't figure out how to make an online payment. Well, now I'm going to call you. That is an experience that you just provided to that person. Another really nice illustration here between a difference between a UI and a UX are these ketchup bottles. I think it's safe to say that we've all used both of these. And on the surface, they look very similar, right? They are two interfaces delivering the exact same product. They look similar, they're the same color, they have the same labels on them, but there's just a slight difference in the interface. And how that relates to the experience, on the left, you have the glass bottle that maybe you have to like hit in just the right spot, or you have to shove your knife up in there and try to get the ketchup out. And then all of a sudden, inevitably, you're gonna end up with way more ketchup than you intended after spending 5 minutes trying to get a little drip out. On the right-hand side, you can give it a shake, pop it with one hand, and squeeze out just as much as you need, right? So a very different experience for the exact same product delivery in an almost near identical interface. And this is where you get into the margins of how an incremental change can have a big impact. So I've explained a little bit about what UX is. And before going any further, I'm curious to know if, to your knowledge, your organization is currently considering any of these user experience practices in your organization. All right, thank you for entertaining me there. So it looks like about half of you are doing something with UX, considering that user experience. 25% no, and then 25% I don't know what other people in my organization are doing. Perfectly fine and not uncommon, right? We are in big organizations. There's a lot of moving pieces. So that was very helpful for me to gauge where we might be at as we move into the next phases of this conversation. So interestingly, I wanted to compare it against some industry reports. And there's a company called Envision, and they are a UX related company. They provide software for UX designers. And they conducted recently the largest design maturity survey. And design is also another one of those words. I'm going to use it interchangeably here with the experience. Oftentimes we think of design as what something looks like, but you know, if you've ever walked into like a Five Guys burger place, they'll say, "Hey, welcome to Five Guys." That is also a designed experience. Someone designed, hey, when someone walks in the door, let's create this, let's say hi to everybody. So in this design maturity study, 2,200 companies across 24 industries That did include finance and insurance, which we'll dig in a little bit deeper here in just a moment. About 75% of them, 3/4 of them or so, were larger enterprise organizations, and that's kind of in that space that's going to be a little bit more relevant to us. So we'll be able to start to look at how you view what your company is currently doing in the UX space against industry standards. So we can move forward here. So the way they broke it out was into 5 categories of what they would consider UX maturity or design maturity. At the level 1, we have producers, and these are people that are they're creating outputs, right? Oh, we do have an online portal where someone can go in and make their payment, or maybe fill out a loan application or something like that. So we've created an output at that level 1. The challenge is for us in UX, we care more about the outcomes than just the outputs. We live in a very output-rich environment where we can just create tons of websites and tons of portals and tons of things, but we don't always know, are they providing value? Are they solving problems? And so level 1 is that producers, they're just creating outputs. Level 2 in the connector space is starting to think about those situations that maybe you're experiencing today, where someone might go into let's say a loan application form, and they have to fill out information that you should already know about them. And then they make it to the next phase of that process, and they have to re-enter maybe some information that they just filled out. So in the connectors, you start to look at things in an ecosystem, and you start to say, how do we make these systems talk to each other and work better and create a more seamless experience? And then we go up from there. Level 5 are the visionaries. These are the Amazons and the Apples of the world. I think Chase in the finance space, they were the first to mainstream the ability to take a picture of a check in an app and deposit into your account. Those types of things are kind of the visionary spaces. With the adoption of the UX Lab to Allied, I feel pretty confident to say that today we are in the level 3 and level 4 zone. So in level 3, we are architecting. We aren't just building, right? So if you look at the difference of like building a house, an architect is going to plan for your lifestyle. They're going to plan ahead. Hey, in 5 years, is your grandmother going to be living with you? Let's go ahead and build a wing for her to live in. So I'm going to plan ahead. I'm going to be thinking about how I scale these products rather than just build them and put them out in the world. And then the scientist space, this is where we have to measure the outcomes, right? I said outputs versus outcomes. I have to measure everything that we're doing. Yeah, we just spent 2 years and $2 million building this digital product. How deep can we dig into the value that it might be providing, right? And so that's where that scientist is. The scientist is also going to be applying data and evidence to what we should build next and why we should build it. So that's kind of where Allied might be. You might see yourself somewhere on this plane if you're one of the people who answered yes. Now, if we look a little bit deeper into specifically how that might fit in the banking, finance service, and insurance industries. So that dark blue is our industry, kind of combined. Again, there were 2,200 people that responded to this. Most of them were in the enterprise space. And if we look at level 1 and level 2, we see that our industry is taking up a larger chunk of the pie at the least mature end of the scale. Interestingly in that is we share that space, that level 1, level 2 space with people who might be nonprofits or in the education space, right? Those are 2 industries that are constantly begging, borrowing, maybe even sometimes stealing to get money to do the things they need to do. And here we are in one of the most profitable and richest industries in the world, and we're hanging out in that level 1 and level 2 zone, even eating a larger chunk of that pie. As you look at maturity increase, you start to see that we get a smaller chunk of that pie. And what this tells us is there is a huge opportunity in the finance space to really invest in our users' experience and start to get more of their dollars, more of their attention, just by making it easier. Think of a TurboTax as an example. They are, Intuit owns them, right? And they are doing something where It's hard to get much more complex and convoluted and scary than it is to do taxes. And they've made an experience that seems so simple and hand-holdy, and they're automatically pulling in your previous tax returns. And they're saying, hey, we see that this information is in our records. Can you verify that this is correct or edit what is not? Instead of the traditional way, which is, hey, go in and fill all this stuff out, right? So they're making that experience easier. Anyone in the finance space who starts to own that experience and really invest in it and really measure it, you have a huge opportunity. It's not like you're trying to jump in and compete in a consumer space for selling t-shirts or something like that, right? That is full of rich experiences, or delivering food, competing with the DoorDashes or the Ubers or the Lyfts. We aren't trying to do that. And we are competing in a space of antiquated technology. There's another survey that I don't have up here, but it shows that the finance and insurance space is underserved from a technology standpoint, even from an enterprise technology standpoint. So I challenge you again to view this as like, where's our opportunity? If other people are working on outputs, how do we work on products and services and technology that starts providing real value and measuring the outcomes of that? So of the companies who do invest in the experience and an end-to-end experience, right? Again, we're not just talking outputs here. They see a greater return on that investment. So again, 2,200 people or 2,200 companies responded. It looks like there were a couple people from maybe some organizations. And they see direct impact on things like revenue, on things like cost savings. Now, cost savings is interesting, and I'm going to show a little example here in a moment of operational improvement. So remember I said, what if someone tries to go into your online portal to fill out or to make a payment or set up automatic drafts or something like that, and they don't succeed, right? If you should be able to go in and measure how many people try to do this online versus how many people succeed. If they don't succeed, they now have to call in and make a payment. That call just costs you money because you're paying someone to answer that phone, right? So if you can move that online, then you will reduce operational cost. If someone is trying to fill out a loan application online, and the process seems too convoluted, seems too complex, you're asking them to fill out information you've already asked for, they can't figure out how to do next steps, those sort of things. And again, you should be able to measure the abandonment rate versus the adoption rate and the conversion rate of those applications. If you can improve that experience, then you will increase your revenue. You also don't want someone to start your process, abandon it, and then go to your competitor and start the process over again and have a better experience and complete that way. Speed to market is also really important. Creating software is expensive and time consuming, and sometimes surprisingly so. If you know that you're going to build the right thing the right way before you build it, before you invest in it, then your speed to market, your speed to value is going to go through the roof. And then there's some data around valuations. I'm not sure how interested you guys are in those, but if you are a fintech startup or something along those lines, the investment you've made in your user experience and the fact that you can quantify those outcomes will help you be able to sell your business. So that's some data on industry and how we might compare to it. Now, it's really important when we start to think of voice of the customer or let's go do some user interviews or do some user research, is that you have to pay attention to what they're doing, not just what they're saying, right? They might say, hey, I'm a metaphor guy. The analogy I like to use here is I go to the doctor and I say, hey, doc, my shoulder hurts. I need you to fix my shoulder. She's going to take a look at it and she's going to hear what I said, but she's going to run some tests and take a look around. And she might say, actually, you know what? The problem is in your elbow. There's a tendon that connected to. You feel the pain in your shoulder, but what you actually need is some work done on your elbow. And that is the difference between what someone says and what they need, right? And what they're actually going to do. And then I think a lot of people here care about risk, and UX does mitigate risk. And the illustration that's being used here, again, my metaphors, so often we do the process that's on the bottom, right? We hear that we have a user who wants to do a thing, and we try to interpret that. And it might be anecdotal. It might be one piece of information. It might be our CEO's dream. I was thinking about this in the shower. Now I want to go do a thing. And you try to interpret it. And so then you invest time and money in releasing something. And your users, no, that's not it. That's not what I had in mind. That frustrates me. And you just keep iterating on it until you get to something that's kind of good enough. What UX supposes is, hey, let's start with discovery and research and understand the problems more deeply. And let's make sure that through each cycle, we are providing actual value. What problem are we trying to solve? Why are we trying to solve it? Who is it a problem for? And then let's release on that. And we know we're not going to make it perfect day one, but it is going to be a fully functioning use case that is going to provide value in that moment. And then we're going to learn and we're going to measure. And then we're going to improve on it, and we will get to the place that we need to get. The thing about these two charts is they are on the same timeline. At the surface, at the beginning, you think, hey, let's go to market fast. Let's get an output. Let's produce something. But by the time you've iterated on it and gotten it to a good enough state, you would have already gotten there had you known what problems you were trying to solve before you started trying to solve them. And you've also provided a better experience the whole way through. You've probably lost fewer clients or lost fewer sales than the other route. So think of UX as mitigating risk, trying to understand the problem deeply and then solving a real problem using research and data. And so the problem-solving methodology looks a little something like this for us. And again, UX didn't invent this. There are terms like design thinking and just strategic problem solving. And this particular example, if you're interested in learning more, is called the double diamonds methodology. As you can see, there are 2 diamonds on the screen. But where we start is always really identifying and understanding very deeply the problem. What is the problem? Who's it a problem for? Those types of things. And let's define it. This is a problem because X, Y, Z. The risks of not solving this problem are X, Y, Z. And then, so this is diverging and converging and bringing us into the vision and the plan. A lot of people start with a vision and a plan, with an idea, without having fully validated or defined the problem they're trying to solve. So once we have a vision and plan, then we start to validate, is that actually going to solve the problem? And this is where we might do things like prototypes, and we do rapid prototyping. So in a very short period of time, we are testing a design, a screen. It might be like a, in your case, it might be a loan application screen. We're going to very quickly design 4 versions of a form, and we're going to test it. And that will tell us which one of these performs better. Does it solve the problem? Does it solve the problem adequately? And this is where we learn, build, measure. It's a very iterative process. And then once we can define that in a rapid prototype phase, now we can invest the money with actual developers who are going to code it and build it and put it on an internet and get to a solution. And that create part is the most expensive and time-consuming part. And so many of us in our industries start there. We start with creating and putting out a solution, and that's where you end up with the little set of tires and then the bed of the truck and then another tire and then the cab. And so following this process, understanding the problem before you try to solve it, validating that it is a problem and that your solution is going to work, and then releasing the solution is how you want to start approaching problems. Now, you've got to make sure that what you're building is worth building, right? You can go through that exercise I just said, and you can say, yeah, I fully understand this problem, and I have an idea that would solve this problem, but that doesn't mean that it's worth actually pursuing. Again, building software is time consuming and expensive. So what you want to do is make sure that it's feasible to actually build it, right? I've got ideas every day, and I go running around Allied, and I go up to people and I say, I have this idea, and they explain to me why it's completely impossible, right? The technology is not there yet because of certain ecosystems and things we can't control, regulations, maybe things like this, make something that just isn't feasible. And then you need to measure the value of building it, right? This might be value to effort. How much is it going to cost versus how much effort am I going to get? In the case of maybe a 1% increase in online conversions, that might actually mean millions of dollars to you. But maybe tweaking that page is only going to cost you $100,000. And then you want to make sure that what you're going to create is usable. And you need all three of these. There are things that are feasible and are valuable, but are completely unusable, right? And I think you've probably experienced them in your consumer life, trying to do a thing through a web application and it's just terrible and it sucks and you just want to blow up the world. So if you can combine all of these three things, then that is what you need to build and go to market with. So a real world example for us right now is we have a web portal where people can go in and verify that they have insurance, right? This is part of our CPI program, our collateral protection insurance program, where we send out notices to people who we have reason to believe are not adequately insured. And we say, hey, please go to this website and fill this out. It's a required thing based on their loan agreement. It's a pretty straightforward thing to do, but our data shows us that only about half the people who try to do it succeed. So they come to the website with the intent to give us proof of insurance, and somewhere along the way they fall off. That results in either us having to send another notice in the mail, which costs us 61 cents, or need to answer a phone call, which costs us, $5, let's say, per phone call that we have to pick up. So on the left, you have the current experience that we have. On the right is the experience that is currently in development phase. So if we go forward here, we created a rapid prototype of that experience and we tested it through with actual consumers, right? We get a pool of consumers who fit the profile of our type of borrower here. And then we have them try to complete the task in both interfaces. On the right here, you can see the dark or the green is our wireframes. That's our prototype. And you can see how much more successful people are at completing that. We've estimated that if we can move the needle just by 10 points, 10% more people who try to fill out this online form succeed, that will result in almost $500,000 a year in operational cost savings from us not having to pick up phones, from not having to send additional notices. So just a slight 10% increase in conversion rates in our digital experience can save us $500,000 a year. And that is the impact that UX can start to provide. So a couple takeaways. I'm not seeing any questions coming through, so I'm going to challenge you one more time to get them in before we wrap up here. UX mitigates risk. Remember that you are not your user. This is one of the big pitfalls. Well, I like the color blue, so let's make the button blue. Don't do that. Always start with problems. Don't just jump right into prescriptive solutioning. Also, try to avoid making your problems your users' problems. Yeah, well, because of some back-end process that we integrated 10 years ago, we need Mary to go and photocopy this thing. And so it's going to take 3 days for the consumer to know if something has happened. That is your problem. That consumer is going to get tired of waiting and they're going to go to someone else's form and fill that out instead. So this syncs up to the next one. How do you make complex things appear simple? Think TurboTax again. Very complex. They've made it extremely simple and approachable. Use data and evidence, not just your opinions. Again, I don't like the color blue. Well, data indicates, we've tested it, we've validated it. And then I think the biggest call to action I can give you, because you may not have all the skill sets to do everything else, but what you can do is you can identify friction in your organization, whether it's upstream or downstream from the goal that you're trying to achieve, and then kill it. Hey, why does it take us 3 days to do this thing? Why can't that just be done in real time? Where is a friction point when I look at where consumers are dropping off of our online payment or our loan application form? Why are they falling off at that point? There's some sort of friction there that's creating that. So go forth, find friction in your organization, and try to kill it with UX.
So as we look at, thank you. As we look at today's takeaway, I think this is really what we wanted to share with all of you today is we know there's a volatile, uncertain environment, and we have to think about how our business can thrive, providing solutions now, but also in the future, especially with many more people working digitally and remotely versus in offices. Implement and find a way to use effective, efficient, and friendly digital communications among all parties. So it doesn't necessarily have to be just consumers. Think about the number of vendor partners and suppliers that touch your organization. And then finally, is there a way to begin to leverage user experience to help you effectively solve problems and provide needed solutions, but most importantly, to make it a great experiences so that users, vendors, partners, and suppliers have a way in which it's very easy to do business with you. So we really hope you've enjoyed this webinar. We thank you for your attendance, and I'll turn it back over now to Nick.
And Barrett, thank you so much for the intriguing and insightful presentation during our webinar today titled A Customer-Centric Approach to Risk and Recovery. Again, our special guests for this webinar, Ann Holtzman and Barrett Kreitz from Allied Solutions. And just a quick reminder that we are recording today's session, so keep watch of your inbox for a link to that recording to review the great presentation and share it with your colleagues at your respective organization. And just a couple of questions to follow up from the great presentation that you shared, and perhaps Barrett, maybe you could take the viewpoint from a consumer customer, and maybe you could view from a client's finance company, insurance company, dealership perspective. What would you say are maybe some practical ways to gather some customer feedback and their experiences of how the platform works, how the processes and protocols unfold? Barrett, let's begin with you. Maybe if you could approach it from a consumer perspective, and Ann to follow up from the client's service provider industry perspective.
Yeah, so I'll take it first. I think, that's a very good practical question. So thank you for asking it. I think there are two main areas if we're relating to the digital space that you want to begin with. First is make sure that your digital properties are tracking analytics and being able to put out data, right? So if you don't know how many people visited a thing or tried to do a thing, or how many buttons they clicked on, what buttons they clicked on, what buttons they didn't click on, you need to have that. So whomever is running your digital properties, if they can't provide you that, then ask them to put it in. It's in most cases, like a Google Analytics product is completely free, and it's very easy to install on virtually any web application. So make sure that you have that, because that is one place you're going to start. That data will tell you what is happening, but it won't tell you why it's happening. So it's very quantitative. I can see this many people try to do a thing and they don't, or they do succeed, right? Now, to understand why is where you get into the qualitative piece. And that is where you actually want to, I don't really like the term focus grouping, but you want to talk to actual consumers. And there are different ways to do that. You can survey your actual customers. So maybe something pops up on your website and says, hey, do you have time for a quick survey? I think we've all been on hold on a phone call where we're asked to do a survey afterward. But there are also services where you can just have consumers who fit a certain profile that you're looking for try to do a thing. They can fill out surveys, you can show them interfaces, you can have them try to complete tasks, and you can measure things that way. Depending on the relationships you have with your folks, or your consumers or your borrowers or whomever, getting on the phone with some of them, incentivizing them. Hey, we're going to give you a Amazon gift card if you let us talk to you for 10 minutes. And ask them, what was your experience like? What worked? What didn't work? What do you wish we could do better? And then combine that data with all those other data points that you might be acquiring.
Yeah, and Nick, what I would add to that is, as a provider, I ask a lot of, ask as I meet with my service providers or our clients, both of which I meet with on an ongoing basis. I always ask them for good guys, bad guys, right? Tell me the good guys of communicating and doing business with us and the ease of doing business with us. And talk to me a little bit about some of the bad guys or your frustrations or areas where it's painful to do business with us. And from that, we learn quite a bit. And also, I think you have to maintain a level of curiosity.
Yeah.
As you look at the addition or expansion of business partner and servicer relationships and client relationships, always looking for opportunities to understand how they do business, how they would like to do business. So it's always interesting for me when I meet with a client or a vendor or business partner to say, okay, pretend that, that you've got a blank slate. How would you go about doing business more efficiently, effectively with Allied Solutions or with our business unit or with a certain service or product? I think things just like that, it's amazing the feedback that you'll get and the creativity that gets spawned from those very simple conversations.
And I absolutely love what you were saying there. The curiosity piece, massively important, but also the vulnerability, right? If you really want to know what people's problems are so that you can go solve them, you have to be vulnerable. You can't come in with an ego. You have to be open to learning where, is the baby ugly and how might I make it pretty? And if you aren't inviting those conversations and if you aren't being vulnerable in that way, you will live in an echo chamber thinking that everything you're doing is just fine.
Certainly very vivid imagery from our special guest experts for today's webinar, Ann Holtzman and Barrett Kreitz of Allied Solutions for today's session, a customer-centric approach to risk and recovery. And Ann, let's continue with you, and then Barrett certainly chime in as well. Certainly without divulging any secrets or anything that would be of a compromising nature. But again, how is Allied utilizing the user experience to manage risk and recovery solutions? How is the shop kind of putting this in practice? Ann, we'll begin with you, and then Barrett, your perspective as well.
It's so interesting, Nick. I'll give you a funny story here. So I joined Allied Solutions in January of 2009. And about 8 months into my tenure at Allied, we were asked to build our very first client portal. And it was around risk management, losses, insurance tracking, those services. So interesting enough, one of our VPs of technology and strategy today and myself sat in a room with 2 Allied developers and created our client portal. Interesting enough, we did not talk to a single client. And we integrated with business partners. We thought we had the world's greatest client portal, now known today as Centerpoint. I now look at the fact that 10 years later, and I think Barrett, over probably a 3 or 4 year project scope, we rebuilt Centerpoint, our client portal, and we actually talked to our clients via the UX lab to build the application and the portal. It was a completely new process. has delivered, I think, phenomenal results for us and our clients. But it was the difference of how we built it 10 years ago, looking only internally at what Allied's needs were, versus what we did in our latest rebuild, looking at what our client needs are. And our product is so much better. The solution, the portal, what it does, how it functions, you know, the ease in which our clients can interact with us. And honestly, it's night and day when I compare those two processes and those two particular applications. We've done the same with several other applications inside our organization, Refund Plus being the newest one, where you know, we're going out and figuring out a way for not only lenders to have a user interface, but for auto dealers to have a user interface. And I don't know we would have ever gotten to the auto dealer interface had it not been for User Experience Lab. And literally Barrett sitting in a meeting with us and saying, well, if there's so much communication with dealers, don't you think you ought to find an easy way for dealers to communicate with you? And we would have glossed right over that in the project without him there at the table with us. So those are two very practical examples. Barrett, believe me, has his sleeves rolled up in all this, so he may even have better answers than I do, Nick.
Thanks, Ann, and I really appreciate all the kind and amazing words. I think you're awesome. I think the Centerpoint example is spot on. So we inherited the product that Ann was describing, and what's interesting is what we built versus how people wanted to or were using it. And I would go in and look at all of these features that the system could do. It had all this functionality in there, but you couldn't see the forest for the trees. And when we looked at what people actually wanted to do in there, it was like 3 or 4 things. Now, those were 3 or 4 complex things, but it wasn't 150 things that we wanted them to do or thought we wanted them to do. And so each of those new features, those enhancements, one, it cost us time and it cost us money, but what it was actually doing was getting in the way of the tasks that they actually wanted to do, or in UX terms, we call it the job to be done. They had a job to do, and we were actually making it more difficult by trying to be helpful without really understanding their needs. And so we were able to remove so much of that clutter. And a real tangible example is our lenders who use this software, we could measure that to fill out a gap claim, for instance, it used to take them 15 minutes. In our new piece of software, it takes them 5. So just by streamlining that process. Now, to our lenders, that's real money, right? They're paying someone to click those buttons in our piece of software. So now we've just freed up a great deal of their time, and they can go focus on their borrowers, right? They can focus on other things in the organization. We're also working on, so I've talked a lot about how we can save money with UX. There's also tremendous revenue opportunities as well. So we have a product that helps lenders on direct loans sell point of sale products. And we are starting to really look at that selling process, that digital selling process, and really measure how might we increase revenue for ourselves and our clients by making those products easier to buy and easier to sell.
Closing moments here with our 2 experts, Ann Holtzman and Barrett Kreitz of Allied Solutions, with today's webinar, a customer-centric approach to risk and recovery. And there on the screen is the contact information of how to reach Allied Solutions, their website, alliedsolutions.net/resources, as well as the direct contact information for both Ann and Barrett. And to wrap up our webinar today, Barrett, will begin with you, and Ann will let you have the last word. Certainly, and the year that we are in, can't have a conversation or a presentation without, again, touching on COVID-19 and the impacts that it's had on all of our lives and business operations. Barrett, your thoughts as far as how the pandemic has impacted the strategies that you've articulated, and Ann, closing thoughts from you to round us out on how this whole situation might impact risk and recoveries. Barrett, we'll begin with you, and Ann, the last word.
I love this question. I can say, from my point of view, from the perch that I sit on, I think that we have lost maybe 5 to 10 years of runway on digital adoption in areas that we thought weren't going to be a problem for us yet. And the reason I say that is, through the lockdown period, you had people who might have been a little uncomfortable with buying cars online, for instance, right? So we start, the dreaded word like Carvana, for instance. You look at people who weren't comfortable shopping on Amazon, weren't comfortable ordering a delivery through a DoorDash. They preferred those more traditional methods of doing business. They weren't comfortable using Zoom. They weren't comfortable having their video cameras on. All of that stuff, we just fast forwarded 5, 10 years into the future, because in order to survive, they had to acclimate. They had to get comfortable with that. So you have a whole generation, well, it's an old generation maybe, of people who are now suddenly a lot more comfortable with interacting in these ways. And we have to be ready to accommodate them, right? If we thought, oh, no one's going to be comfortable buying cars this way for another 5, 10 years, we have time. I think that you've just lost some time.
And Ann, how about you?
So I think as we look at our solutions, Barrett said it best, and that is, it's really stepped up our need for all of our solutions to have a digital footprint and a digital way to interact. I think what's been the toughest part, I think both business and personally, Nick, is the lack of collaboration face to face. And no matter what we may believe in how effective and efficient we can be behind the screens, there's a lot to be said still for collaboration face to face. And I know for many of the folks on this call, and for many of our colleagues and partners, it will be great when we can all get back together again face to face, because you do lose some momentum and some of the continued relationship building. As we look at our products, it's very simple. We have to plan for a 2021 that probably financially, economically, and otherwise is different than what we have experienced over the last, say, 5 to 7 years. And that's what we're prepping to do, so that we can be there as a solution for our clients and our partners.
Very good. Well, we look forward to the day when not only take advantage of all the technology developments, but as well as those face-to-face interactions as well. That's Barrett Kreitz and Ann Holtzman from Allied Solutions. Barrett, Ann, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and discussion about a critical topic of the times. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nick.
Again, the contact information is there on your screen to reach Allied Solutions, their website, www.alliedsolutions.net/resources, as well as the direct contact information for both of our presenters today, Ann Holtzman and Barrett Kreitz. So we thank you so very much for joining us, and on behalf of all of us at Cherokee Media Group, we thank you for joining us, and we look forward to having you again next time.